Hey everybody, it's social media producer Tom Barnes. This is the Chicago scene, very historic version of the Chicago scene. Have you heard of the name Conrad Seipp? Well, he's like a beer connoisseur of Chicago. Started a brewery way back in the 1800s at this site right here. That's the old Michael Reese site. But before it was Michael Reese, it was the Seipp Brewing Company right here on Chicago's south side. I mean, we're in the shadows of downtown. As you can see, McCormick Place. I'm going to talk to like his great granddaughter, Lauren, who has now revived the brand and started it all up again, and they're selling it at Metropolitan Brewing. So we're going to get a nice little story about this amazing Chicago scene. So let's go and find her. I have her hanging out right over here. All right, so I've made my way down to the old site of this beautiful factory in Bronzeville, south of McCormick Place, with the great granddaughter of Conrad Seipp. Lauren, how you doing, Lauren?
Oh, I'm great. I'm so glad to be here today. This is a real thrill for me.
Well, thanks for hanging out with me this afternoon. So you are now the owner of a company that your great grandfather started, and which had his brewery right behind us.
Yes, I like to think of myself as the reviver of the company, but I guess I am the owner right now for sure.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about the company and its Chicago roots.
Well, Conrad Seipp was a German immigrant, and he came to the United States and made his way to Chicago. And in 1854, he opened a brewery. And the brewery burnt down, unfortunately. As
very Chicago.
Yeah. Very Chicago, even before the fire. Yeah. But he built another one. He was not discouraged. And he built his second one right here on 27th and Cottage Grove. So we're just a little bit south of that. But as you can see, it's a good place for anything because it's right by the railroad tracks and then right by the lake.
Yeah, and for people who might not know this, these railroad tracks kind of were where Lake Michigan started, just beyond in that parking lot over there. We even found some old pictures of the brewery, the second brewery, and the lake kind of rolled up right up to kind of where the railroad tracks are, because after all that was landfill from the Chicago fire. So that's why people might not know that. So I thought I'd throw that in there. But anywho, great location for beer. And this isn't just like a little beer company. This was massive. At one time outselling Anheuser-Busch way back in, what did you say?
In the 1870s, Conrad Seipp, for a year or two, made the most beer in all of America. And I'd say that's a pretty good accomplishment. And he was always one of the leading brewers or producers of beer in Chicago until Prohibition and rationing from World War II led to the closure of the original brewery, and it was demolished in 1933 to make way for Michael Reese Hospital. He was an immigrant who worked really hard and had a lot of good luck. I want to never discount the importance of good luck in life, in that he had one of the breweries that did not burn down in the Chicago fire, and I think that's one of the reasons why he became so particularly successful, is because half of his competition literally just went up in smoke.
And again, I mean, to be right on literally that parking lot was water at one time, and I'm sure that helped things not get burned down, right? You're right next to the lake, it's going to help you out.
It couldn't have hurt, and I do think that the fire line, if I'm not mistaken, was just further north. So brewery was unscathed, and he was able to provide the workers who were at that time rebuilding Chicago, but really building the modern day Chicago that we know. And that's why we say that Seipp's beer is the beer that built Chicago, because it's been here pretty much since the beginning, and it's been through a lot of tough times with Chicago and a lot of good times.
So you have a couple of things that you brought that I made you bring out here to this random spot in the city, but I think it's kind of cool to see a little bit of the history that I'm sure some people have seen. So what do you have here for us right now?
Well, in my bag of tricks, yeah, I have Conrad Seipp was a prolific advertiser. He was great at marketing, I think. If this is one of his beer trays, and legend has it that this is one of his daughters, who's the spokesmodel.
So it'd be one of your great aunts.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think this was my great grandmother, but I could be mistaken. I'd love for anyone who knows anything about who might be in here great Aunt Clara, which
Okay.
would be great. She's a beautiful lady. So I think beer trays were very popular, and he has had many different beautiful ones that you can find on eBay and bid against us to try and get them.
So the bottle you're about to show me right now was literally bottled here like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Let's see what we got here.
So this is a good example. Hopefully many people out there have bottles like this, because many of them have survived. As you can see, I think it's embossed or engraved. I never know what it's called when you have the writing sort of raised from the glass.
I think it's embossed.
Embossed.
I'm sure somebody will correct us on the internet.
You can see his logo, which is still our logo today, is embossed. It's just a really pretty bottle. Something that I got really excited about, in addition to these beautiful old bottles that are embossed, is we actually were able to locate some bottles that actually have labels still on them, which was a thrill. I just can't believe that it still exists.
Yeah, you're talking bottles that are well over 100 years old. That, and tell me, you found, this is a good story with this one.
So this bottle, sorry for my trash here, this bottle we found because basically through social media someone learned that we were doing this revival of the Conrad Seipp Brewing Company, and they had just been remodeling their kitchen, and they found this bottle in the wall of the kitchen, which I'm assuming maybe a construction worker 100 years ago threw this in the wall. And
probably when they were hanging the plaster back then, or putting the plaster and not hanging it, but yeah.
Exactly. So
Very Chicago story, though.
So I'm really grateful for the person for contacting us and our friends who helped make this all happen, because this is a really cool bottle. This is a label from, he had several different labels of the extra pale, and this is one of the labels from the later part of the brewing company. So you can see it's beautifully well preserved and has important information on here, like this beer is brewed from choice Bohemian hops and fancy barley by the original Seipp process and warranted to keep in any climate and warranted to keep in any climate.
Fancy hops.
Fancy hops.
Fancy hops. Very official. Very
Sorry,
Chicago.
Fancy barley.
I'm
not
sorry,
fancy hops.
fancy barley.
The Bohemian hops gave us a good clue as to what we should be using to recreate this beer. So that's an example of a little clue that Conrad left us, so we would know how to remake the delicious beer that he made.
Ah. Speaking of the original recipe, how did you guys? Has it been handed down? Is it kind of just piecemeal together? How does that whole thing work for the new brew?
I'm gonna, as I talk about that, I'm just gonna hold this bottle because I think it's a really cool one too, and it also gives an idea of how the bottles used to be quite big. This is another beautifully preserved label, which we were kind enough to be loaned from a friend of his Pilsner, and again you can see his awesome logo, which I love.
I mean, these bottles, these are a beer collector's dream, are they not?
I think so. And so many people have them, which is great. I love it when people send me pictures on the through social media or the internet. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, and you said your great-great-grandfather was a big proponent in advertising, and that's why the beer trays, that's why a lot of advertisement, even during the World's Fair that happened in Chicago, just down the street, in Jackson and Washington Square Parks, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I'm sorry I keep
it's fine.
into my bag of tricks.
It's
but
okay.
I have another trick.
Yeah, what do we got here?
This is a replica, but it's an exact replica of the World's Fair souvenir that the Seipp Brewing Company put out for the 1893 World's Fair. And Conrad Seipp unfortunately died just before the fair. A few years before the fair, and believe it or not, Pabst was one of his pallbearers. They were friends.
Really?
I can tell you another story about that in a second, but as you can see, in this little souvenir
pamphlet,
thank you, they just have pictures of the brewery, which was a big one, and you can see the lake here in the background with some other pictures of the big tanks where they were holding and fermenting all of the beer. Obviously beer making processes have really changed since then, so you're not going to see horses pulling up to pick up the beer and take it out to distribute it in Chicago. We have some other ways of transportation.
Yeah,
now,
things got a little different.
I think we don't think about that when we think about the old days. A brewery couldn't just be a place where you made beer. You also had to have your horses there. You had to have your malting rooms. They just were big because they had so much stuff going on.
Hence why we're standing where we are now with the footprint of an old hospital that was an old brewery, because it was a massive facility.
It was a big facility.
Yeah.
I wanted just to point out here, this is what the Extra Pale label looked like around the time of the 1893 World's Fair, and that's the label that we're using now.
More bags of tricks.
As the replica for our Seipp's bottle. So if you see this in stores, pick it up and give it a try, because it tastes great and it's a great way to connect with history.
And so what would you describe the taste as for the beer connoisseur out there?
That's so great that you asked that, because I think, why ask me when we can ask the Conrad Seipp Brewing Company? He specifically says in this pamphlet exactly what it tastes like now,
yeah, let's hear it.
in my opinion. The Extra Pale and the Pilsner are exceedingly favorite brands of delicious flavors with a light body and an aftertaste of the hop. And I think that's a really great way to describe it.
That is a great way to describe it.
And just to be clear, the Extra Pale is a version of his Pilsner. And we're calling it a Pre-Prohibition Pilsner, just to help people orient to what the beer is, because we're not used to Pre-Prohibition Pilsners.
Yeah, right. And you're brewing the current new beer at Metropolitan, right?
Yes. Doug and Tracy Hurst and their whole team at Metropolitan have just been wonderful, and I'm so happy to be on a great team with them.
And so what are future plans? Do you want to, is this just the beginning of a bunch of steps that you have to kind of start brewing beer out of a facility that's with the namesake and the whole thing?
Well, I'll tell you, the first step was just to get Extra Pale made and out into the Chicago community. That was really my first focus, and I think now I'd really like to talk with Tracy and Doug and their team there at Metropolitan about the next brand of Seipp's beer that we are going to make and release to the public, because why stop with just one? He had quite a few. And
I was going to ask, do you know how many he had?
He had at least 7, and they were mostly all lagers. To our knowledge, we have some more research to do on the specific brands. I know their labels and I know their names, but I don't know yet exactly their profile and how they were made. So that's some history.
So that's got to be the toughest part, is finding how it was made, the recipes, piecing together things, finding notes of old notebooks. I imagine that's a labor of love.
It's a labor of love, and it's also tremendously exciting.
This is such an exciting Chicago story. That's why I felt the need that we are on the site of your great-great-great-grandfather's brewery, which is not a whole lot of anything right now, as you can see, just because this is the old Michael Reese site that's been waiting for redevelopment. But either way, a fascinating story. And for people who want to find out more information about the brand and where to buy it, where would you recommend people go?
I'm happy to say that the brand is now being Conrad Seipp's Extra Pale is being sold throughout Chicago at bars and retail locations. You can follow us on social media at Seipp Beer. We have a Facebook page, the Conrad Seipp Brewing Company, and then we also have a web page that has a beer finder on it.
Oh, so great! Very convenient.
Go to Seipp's. To Seipp Brewing, to seippbrewing.com, and just look at the beer finder and find the closest retail store to you.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate you hanging out with me this afternoon and telling me this amazing story. Truly a really great Chicago story, and I wish you nothing but the best in getting the Conrad Seipp beer back up and running at full glory, and maybe one day even purchasing a piece of the land that's standing right behind you as an homage to your grandfather.
I love that idea, and I'll say for right now the most important thing to me is that people have the opportunity to connect with Chicago's past, but also to just have a sip of Seipp's and enjoy the present moment as well.
Absolutely. And speaking of, it's hot, it's sunny. I think it is time for a beer. So I'm gonna go look for one right now. I'm gonna use your website to go and find a nice cold one.
That sounds good. Cheers.
All right, cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, how about that? That is a Chicago scene right there. You got a little history, some beer, and a lot of fun facts. If you like the Chicago scene and you wanted to have me come out and check out something, TBARNAS at WGNTV.com, TBarnes at WGNTV.com. And if you want to catch up, go to WGNTV.com, morning news /Chicago scene. I'll see you guys later.